Welcome back to Watch Your Assets, where we've got your money on our minds. I'm your host, Stephanie Bracken, and we are going to be talking about a very exciting topic today, retirement. So, as a certified financial planner, one of the main questions that I get asked for people who are getting close to retirement age is, can I retire? And if I can, when should I retire? And so we're going to get into this a little bit today. There's actually a whole class in the CFP about retirement planning because it's that important. It's one of the main things that people want to know about is if they can retire and when should they retire. Retirement is like reaching the top of a mountain. Think about climbing Mount Everest. Climbing Mount Everest is an incredible feat. Now, I was doing some research on climbing Mount Everest and what it actually takes to climb this mountain. So there are a couple camps that you reach on your journey towards summiting Mount Everest. This is going to tie into retirement planning, I promise. So there's a couple camps that you camp out at on your journey up there. So there's camps, base camp 2, 3, and 4. Now, camp 4 is the last one that you reach before you will do your final ascent and then the descent back down to camp 4. So you'll summit and then descent the same day back to camp 4. Camp 4 is right on the borderline where it's kind of uninhabitable territory. It's hard to breathe up there. So when you summit Mount Everest, and you get to camp 4. Whenever you go to summit the next day, they tell you that there's something called the 2 o'clock rule. So when you go from camp 4 to summiting Mount Everest, you have to do it before 2 p.m. Why 2 p.m.? So what happens is the journey there isn't that difficult. I mean, it is. It's very difficult, but compared to the descent back down, the ascent is not the problem. The descent becomes the problem because after 2 o'clock, what starts to happen on Mount Everest is there's a greater risk of really inclement weather, avalanches, all of these other forces that are outside of your control. Plus, you have to make sure your resources stay intact for you to be able to make it back down. So the climb up isn't necessarily the problem, it's the descent back down. And in retirement planning, it's kind of the same way. The ascent to get you to the point where you think you're about to summit the mountain isn't that difficult. You save into your 401k with every paycheck, and you kind of do that automatically. You really don't miss that money because it's coming out of your paycheck before it ever hits your bank account. You're probably paying off some debts. You're getting close to paying off your mortgage if you have car payments. You've got kids probably that are grown. Maybe they have some student loans that they've taken on themselves. But now that you're into your later working years, you're more focused on that next thing, which is retirement, which is seeing that summit. You get to the top of this mountain, you get to look around, and you get to see all these really beautiful views. But what's on the other side can start to really become an issue if you aren't properly prepared or if you don't take proper steps to ensure that your resources will last you the whole way back on your descent down the other side of the mountain. So that's my analogy for retirement planning is you're going to have challenges along the way, and you're going to have a lot of factors that go into your retirement and can I retire? So that's what I want to talk about today. Now, all these factors aren't necessarily going to apply to every single person, but they're all equally important. So I want to make sure that I hit on all of these for you to at least think about when you're considering when's the right time for me to retire. So let's dive into some of these factors. And let's start with probably the most important one, which is going to be your financial readiness. Because as much as we probably think it takes age and resources or, assets to retire, it really comes down to your assets and your resources and how much you're going to be able to use each year to live on, how much you can afford to live on each year, given the resources that you've packed up, that you've saved for to get to this point. So let's break this down. Whenever I'm reviewing your financial plan, this is really what allows me to peek behind the curtains to see what resources you have going into retirement. And I want to see how all the pieces of your retirement start fitting together into this puzzle that we're going to put together. Nothing happens in a vacuum, and so we need to consider all of these factors. Let's talk about assets first, and I want to primarily talk about liquid assets. So that's going to be things like 401ks or 403bs, TSP, Roth, IRAs, even after-tax money, and even cash are going to be your liquid assets. So these are things that are readily available for you to use in case of emergencies or just for your normal living expenses in retirement. They're not necessarily going to include your illiquid assets, which would be things like property. So that's going to include your house, your cars, if you have any collectibles, art collections, jewelry collections, rental properties, things like that. They're part of the overall picture, but they're not easily liquefiable, and we wouldn't want to liquefy them. We wouldn't want you to sell your home in retirement just to help you make ends meet. We want you to sell your home in retirement so you can downsize or live in, your kind of retirement home, your death home, as my mom calls it. That's what we want to use. What we want you to use that money towards. We don't want you to liquidate your assets, because those assets, your illiquid assets, to live on in retirement. But what counts in this sense, in the illiquid assets, is going to be any debt payments that you have on those properties, any homes, mortgages, HELOCs, car loans, things like that, because that's what's going to eat up some of your resources in retirement. Now, there's no hard and fast rule around how much do I need to retire? That's a question I get asked a lot, is how much do I need to live on? And I even get asked that about, 20, 30-year-olds ask me, how much do I need in retirement? Like, what's the number that we need to live on in retirement? And the answer is, it depends. There is no one solid number that I can say is the threshold for every single person, because it's totally personalized to your lifestyle and your situation. But let's talk about the 4% rule. And I may have mentioned this in my qualified retirement planning podcast, so go ahead and listen to that too to get some more insight into this. But I'll explain the 4% rule. So what the 4% rule says is that we take your overall liquid portfolio, we times that by 4%. Whatever that number is, that is the number that we think you can safely, quote unquote, safely withdraw from your accounts without dipping into the principal balance of the account, where you're kind of just living on the growth. So if you say, for example, if your portfolio returns you 8% and you pull out 4%, your account still grew by that extra 4% that you didn't pull out. So the goal is to, with the 4% rule, the thought behind that is, you're able to live on the growth on your accounts without really touching your actual contributions into that account. That's a prudent industry standard, but it doesn't work for every single person, but it's a good hallmark. So it may not be exact, but if you start getting into the 5, 6, 7, 8% withdrawal rate ranges, that's when you might start noticing that your portfolio value continues to decrease over time as opposed to continuing to grow over time. So that's something that we like to keep in mind whenever we're retirement planning, is how much do you need to live on, right? That's kind of the thing that I want to make people aware of, is your budget. And I've said this, I think I said this in my budgeting episode. Your budget is the number, that number that you live on every month. That is the number that I need to determine really if you can retire. And I'm gonna get into this, but we're gonna talk about health insurance costs. I wanna build in taxes, your withdrawals, and how that affects your tax situation. All of these other, and Social Security and your pensions, and how all of that impacts your budget and your lifestyle, among your taxes too. And I'm going to talk about taxes in a little bit too. But if you have $1 million in your portfolio when you retire that you can draw from across all of, again, not including your house, what do you have liquid? If you have $1 million that's liquid invested in the stock market, a 4% withdrawal rate gets you $40,000 a year. Is that enough to live on? I don't know. That's the thing that we have to ask ourselves whenever we're doing a plan for you. Now, of course, you're also going to have Social Security that we're going to take into account. That might be an extra $20,000, $30,000. So if it's $30,000, that would be $70,000 a year of income that you could generate from all of your sources in retirement, assuming you don't have a pension. So if you were making $150,000 at the end of your career and now you're going to be forced to live on only $70,000, is that enough to maintain a similar lifestyle to what you're used to living now? And, obviously the answer is probably no. And so what can we do about that? Do we need to delay retirement a little bit? Do we need to bump up your savings into your 401k a little bit? Do you need to cut back on your living expenses? There's a lot of different factors that we can help to kind of adjust the sails on your plan. But again, it all starts with your resources, and it starts with how much you need to live on. The other thing I want you to consider is rolling over your 401k. In retirement, sometimes people like to leave their 401ks behind at their old job. And that is totally fine. You are certainly, and I can't imagine that your employer is going to kick you out of the plan when you retire. Most employers allow you to keep your assets in the plan if you want to. So you certainly can do that, and then you can draw on that account as needed. But others like to roll their 401ks into an IRA or a Roth, depending on what bucket of money you had been contributing into your 401k. Again, one is not better than the other here. It's just a matter of preference, of your preferences. But it comes down to a few things if you want to leave your 401k where it is after you retire. Number one, what if the company you worked for goes bankrupt? Your money, it's not going to go away. The creditors aren't going to come for your 401k probably. So you're not going to lose your money. But they might move your provider, they might transfer the money somewhere else, and they might make it a little more difficult for you to locate your money after that happens. Number two, do you want to keep ties to your company after you retire? Some people don't care, and that's totally fine. If you left amicably and you wanted to just go into retirement and you left on good terms and you like the company that you work for, this might not apply to you. But if you want to completely cut ties with your company, you would want to take the money away from that plan. It's rightfully yours, and you can do what you want with it, but some people just want to take it away from the company's management. So that's just something else to consider. Number three, do you like the investment choices that you have within your 401k? Typically, and again, this is back to my qualified retirement episode, typically you're limited in the types of investment vehicles that are available to you in your 401k versus an IRA that might allow for greater diversification, professional management, better advice on what moves could be made in your account to hedge inflation, to hedge against loss, things like that you just might not have available to you within that 401k. So that's another thing that you may want to consider is, do you like the options that you have in your 401k? If it's been performing well and you don't mind the fact that you have to physically adjust your investment portfolio over time, then it might be okay to just leave it there. But if you want more options, an IRA might be a better choice for you. And then number four, my last one here is, do you want to continue managing this money by yourself? So again, that's back to what I was just saying before, is do you like the investment choices, and do you like the fact that you are the one who is managing and selecting these investments? Some people are DIYers, and that is awesome. But others in retirement, they want to rid themselves of all of this responsibility, right? If you fall into the latter camp, an investment management firm like YTS could help you grow your assets, protect your principal, and get you the income that you need in retirement. Again, we offer that professional management where we can say, hey, I think this might be a great investment option for you because of your situation. Let's think about moving some of your assets into this. It's going to do X, Y, and Z for your portfolio. Here's the pros, here's the cons. Tell me what you think. And being hands off in retirement like this allows you to focus on what you actually want to do in retirement. Now, if you like doing this, again, that's great. If you don't, and this really isn't your forte, in retirement, I want you to focus on your hobbies, right? I want you to travel. I want you to spend time with your family. I want you to spend your time doing what you want to do and not be so worried about what's going on with my portfolio. You let us take care of that, and we will ensure that any moves that need to be made, you get a phone call from us and say, hey, market's going a little crazy right now, but don't worry, you're in investments that you're well protected from loss. Everything's going fine. No matter what you decide to do with that asset, though, when I'm looking at your financial plan, I want to at least know about your assets. I think sometimes people want to hide their investments from us because they don't want them to be managed by us, and that is perfectly fine. I understand that you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket conversation, but when I'm doing your financial plan, I at least want to know about them because it's going to contribute to your overall asset allocation that we're going to use for the investments that you do hold with us, and it's also going to help me figure out where might be the most tax-efficient withdrawals that we can take from your portfolio in retirement. Something else to consider with retirement planning is identifying all of your income sources. So I kind of already addressed this, but I just want to harp on it one more time, is figure out where all of your income is going to come from in retirement. For most people, it's going to come from Social Security and your portfolio. If you're blessed enough to have a pension, you may also have a pension that comes into the mix here. Sometimes people, I think, worked for jobs and they maybe don't even know they have a pension. So it's important to go back through your working history and just seeing, did I leave any money behind? Did I abandon a 401k? Do I have even a small pension from this company? And collect all of this data so that we can kind of put it all together and ensure that you are maximizing your income in retirement. Because this is a scary thing, right? So again, your income in retirement most likely is going to be less than it is while you're working. And it's going to probably come from different sources, right? So before you retired, you were putting money into your 401k, into your investment accounts. In retirement, you're not earning any more money, so you're not going to probably put as much or if anything into an investment account because you need to start drawing on that money now. So it's that shift in where is this money going to come from. So in retirement, it's not that a job is paying you, it's that your investment manager is going to pay you every month and you tell us how much you need. And again, that comes back down to your living expenses of, I know I have this much coming in from Social Security every month. I know I have this small amount from a pension. What's my shortfall? And then we can determine if that number is sustainable to withdraw from your portfolio every month. So your withdrawals from your portfolio are considered part of your income. And let's just talk about taxes too while we're at it. So we want to talk about the most tax efficient way to get you the money that you need in retirement. So typically, I don't love to deplete people's cash reserves, but sometimes people keep a lot of cash on hand. So if you're keeping hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank because it helps you sleep better at night, I don't want to deplete your cash reserves completely for your living expenses. Now, we may suggest using a little bit of it if we're going to maybe do Roth conversions, or you maybe have a charitable gift you want to give and you need to pay for the gift or for the taxes on the Roth conversions with cash. That's typically better because there's no tax implications to pulling that money from cash. So that might be first step. If not, though, the next step typically, and this is it's not a blanket statement, it depends on what you have and it depends on your situation. But if you have what's called after-tax money, so this would be money that you put into an investment account after taxes. So this is going to be, they're also called brokerage accounts, they're also called taxable accounts, non-qualified accounts. These are all synonymous terms for money that is in an investment account that is not a retirement account. And again, you can go back to my qualified retirement plan podcast and you can see all these, I have them separated and I talk about all of these different things. But the after-tax money is your pretty favorable tax money because it is not income taxed. So you already paid your income taxes on that money when it went into the account. So when you withdraw any of that money from the account, it is not going to be subject to ordinary income taxes. Ordinary income tax rates are the same if you earn it through a paycheck, the same as if you withdraw from a retirement account. But with after-tax money, because you were taxed on that money before it went in, the IRS does not care. However, the growth on a non-retirement account is going to be taxed. Now, it's going to be taxed at more favorable tax rates in your capital gains tax rates, which I talk about in my tax planning podcast. That money is taxed at different tax rates, and it's a little more favorable. So, and depending on how much income you make each year, earned income, depending on how much earned income you have for your household, you might not pay anything in capital gains. So it just depends, and that's one of the things that we can help you with, is figuring out if you have gains in a non-retirement account, what can we sell off to help you mitigate your capital gains, but still get you the income that you need. And then after that is depleted, we might start drawing from your pre-tax retirement account. So that's going to be your traditional IRA, a traditional 401k, all of these assets that are retirement accounts that you never paid income taxes on. So again, whenever you put your money into the pre-tax bucket of your 401k, you don't pay taxes on that money. And that's a good thing. That's an advantage today, because you're getting a tax benefit to not having that money be taxed from your paycheck and then going into your 401k. It goes in before taxes. So when you pull the money out of a qualified account, that's another name for a retirement account. Again, 401ks, IRAs, all of that, anything that's not Roth, but it's retirement money. Because you didn't pay taxes on that money up front, the IRS wants their share, and they will tax you on that full distribution at your ordinary income tax rates. Now, that's not necessarily that big of a deal, because in retirement, you're probably going to be in a lower tax bracket than you are today while you're working. If you're making over $100,000 while you're still working, but you determine you only need $30,000 from your portfolio, that's going to be taxed at a lower rate because your income isn't as high. So it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world that your IRA is taxed at ordinary income tax rates, unless you have a lot of guaranteed income in retirement. And this is something that we see a lot with our federal employees, is federal employees tend to have been really great savers over time. So they have large 401k or TSP balances, and they also have pretty substantial pensions. So sometimes those folks are able to live purely on their pensions and their Social Security and don't need to draw from their retirement accounts. So in that case, that's where we might have Roth conversions come into the conversation, or other tax savings conversations with these clients where, hey, you really aren't going to touch much of this retirement money. How can we help you save in taxes? Because what's going to happen down the line is, on those qualified dollars, even if you don't need the money from those accounts, once you reach, it's 73 now, it's going to be 75 in a couple of years. When you reach either 73 or 75, depending on how old you are, you're going to be subject to required minimum distributions from your pre-tax retirement accounts. So Roth accounts are not subject to what are called RMDs, required minimum distributions again, but pre-tax assets are. So a lot of the times, and I'm speaking to mostly federal employees, but that's not always the case with just federal employees. This can apply across the board as well. So at some point, you are going to be forced to take distributions from your qualified retirement accounts to satisfy your RMDs. If you don't satisfy your RMDs, there is a penalty. So not only are you going to be taxed on these distributions, but if you don't satisfy the RMD, you're also going to have a penalty on the portion that you did not take from your RMD. So again, for federal employees, what we find is they don't really need that money to live on. So over time, that money just stays invested in the market. It continues to grow over time. So when they reach RMD age, their RMDs become really, really meaningful. I'm talking over $100,000 worth of distributions that need to be taken from their portfolio, and you have to take them whether or not you need the money. So one of the ways that we can help you get ahead of the taxes that are going to be owed on all of those distributions when you don't need the money in the first place is to do Roth conversions. Now, Roth conversions don't apply to everybody, but there's something to at least consider is if you have a large bucket of pre-tax assets, Roth conversions might be helpful to you in the future. So that's the process of taking your pre-tax dollars and transferring them or converting them into a Roth IRA. When you convert those dollars, that convertible portion is going to be taxable. It's going to be taxed at your ordinary income tax rates. But the goal is to get that money out of the pre-tax bucket into Roth, which is a more favorable bucket because after you pay the taxes on it, that money is never taxed again. It's not subject to RMDs. It's not going to be subject to income taxes when you pull the money out. Plus, any non-spouse beneficiaries that inherit a Roth IRA are not going to have to pay any income taxes on their distributions. And beneficiary accounts, whether they're traditional IRAs or Roth IRAs, that money has to be depleted within 10 years of inheriting the account if you're not a spouse. So if you're not that person's spouse, you're a child, you're a nephew, a niece, a grandchild, something like that, you have 10 years to take all of the money out of that account. And Roth money won't be as much of a tax burden to your heirs as pre-tax money would be. So it kind of lends itself to not only the tax saving part of this, because again, Roth money is not subject to RMD, so you're getting ahead of the taxes that'll eventually be due on the money that you'll have to take out to satisfy your RMDs. So once the money's in Roth, you won't pay RMDs anymore. And when your beneficiaries inherit it, they are not going to owe any more income taxes on that money. So it's a two-pronged fork, if you will, where the goal is to help you save yourself in taxes and to potentially put your beneficiaries in a better spot as well. Plus, once all of that money is converted to Roth, you won't owe any more taxes on that money either. So if you need to take $100,000 for a distribution for a large trip and some living expenses, you just take $100,000 from your Roth. You don't owe any taxes on that $100,000. It's all in Roth. So again, that's something to consider, but it doesn't work for everybody. So that's something that we would want to at least consider as part of the conversation. And there's some other factors that Roth conversions kind of lend themselves to as to whether or not they're advantageous for somebody's situation. Your age is one of those things. If you're, getting into your 70s, it may not be that advantageous to do Roth conversions anymore. If you need a large portion of your IRA dollars to live on, Roth conversions might not make any sense because of the extra tax burden that is going to be placed on you. It just might not make any sense. So it just depends on your situation, but it's at least worth exploring if you have, a large bucket of pre-tax money whenever you retire. One of the other things people ask us about in retirement planning is, what do I do with my debt? Right? Sometimes people want to go into retirement debt-free, and that's an awesome way to think. Sometimes, depending on, again, your situation, we may advise, yes, take a lump sum distribution from somewhere to pay this off, or we might say, you know what, no, it doesn't make sense for you to pay this off right now. Just keep paying your monthly payments until the loan is paid off. What is that threshold? When does that make sense? It kind of depends on the interest rate. So if you have a mortgage and your interest rate is like 2%, we certainly would not want you to take a lump sum distribution out of your 401k to pay off your mortgage just so you can go into retirement debt-free. I know those payments are annoying to make each month. I know that you want to be free and clear in retirement, but that interest rate is amazing, and we're probably never going to see 2% interest rates ever again. So the thought there is, by keeping your money invested in the stock market, you can probably earn more in income or growth on your portfolio than you could with that 2% interest rate. So paying it off is doing yourself a little bit of a disservice. At 2% interest, that's kind of free money, right? So you should just be making your monthly payments. Now, if you've got 7, 8, 9% interest rates, then maybe the conversation lends itself to paying that off. But it just depends on your situation. It depends how much money we think you can earn on your portfolio versus the interest rate on your loans. But that's kind of the trade-off, is how high is your interest rate and how much do we think you can earn each year in your portfolio, and when does it make sense to start paying some of those things off in big lumps and chunks. And the last thing I'll say about kind of the financial aspect of this is that it's important to review your plan often. So it's not sufficient enough to just review it one time the year before you retire and then never look at your plan again under the assumption that, yeah, we looked at it once and I'm good to go. Your financial plan is living and breathing. It lives and breathes just as you do. And so that means we need to review it every so often, even if it's just every couple of years, to make sure nothing has changed. Maybe there were years where you had to take really large distributions out of your accounts that really ate into the principal balance of your account. Maybe you had some unfortunate circumstances. You had some large medical bills that you had to pay, and you had to take hundreds of thousands of dollars out of your portfolio to pay for those. It's harder for your portfolio to recover from that money because you're not putting anything into it. So that would be something that would warrant us reviewing your financial plan. Maybe you got divorced. Maybe you got remarried. Maybe you had grandchildren. Maybe just your goals have changed. Maybe you were a big traveler, but you're starting to slow down a little bit. So maybe it's a case of, hey, I was really spending a lot in these first couple of years of retirement, but now I think I can scale back a little bit. I'm not traveling as much. My knees kind of hurt. So maybe now the conversation is not about travel so much as it is about, I need my knees replaced. So your needs are going to change over time is all I'm saying. So I want to ensure that your withdrawal percentage is still within range and that you're not going to outlive your money, because that's at the end of the day what I don't want to have happen. And if we work under the assumption that, we looked at your plan one time and we think it's good, and we just forever say, oh yeah, your plan was good 10 years ago, it's still good today, if we never actually review it, we're just making blind assumptions and it just might not be true anymore. So reviewing your plan, again, at least every couple of years, into those first couple of years of retirement especially. And of course, as you're thinking about retirement, that's a big time for us to review a financial plan for you. And then again, as you get into retirement, we definitely want to review your plan every so often. Now let's talk about some more fun aspects of retirement planning, right? So let's talk about lifestyle planning really quick. What do you want to do in retirement, right? Because it's not just about leaving work. It's about thinking about how you're going to spend your time. Do you have hobbies that you want to dedicate more time to? Do you have grandchildren that you're going to be responsible for their care a couple days a week? Do you like to travel? Do you like giving back to the community and doing community service volunteering? Or maybe you want to go back to work. Maybe you take a couple years off of work and get into retirement. You settle in with Social Security, you get on Medicare, and then you say, hey, I'm kind of bored now. Maybe I want to go back and get a part-time job of some kind. So those are things to think about, is what are you going to do with your time? Because leading up to retirement, as you're working, you have a routine, right? You wake up in the morning, you go to your job 5 days a week, you come home, you eat dinner, you do what you do, you go to the gym, you take care of the kids after work, you go to bed, repeat. It's a routine that you have. But in retirement, this is going to be a brand new routine that you're going to have to create for yourself. And so it's going to be I hope fun. I hope if you're financially ready to retire that this is going to be a fun thing to think about, but it is a conversation of, I don't want to see you just waste away in retirement. I want you to do the things you want to do. I want to see you enjoy the money that you've worked so hard to save up over time. I want you to explore new hobbies. I want you to make new friends. I want you to travel to all the places that you want to travel to. I want you to get out on the golf course. I want you to have a sunburn every day. Whatever that is, I want you to be able to do it. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking about retirement, that it's not just about the financial aspect, it's what are you going to do with your time? Another thing to consider here is, where are you going to live? Again, I mentioned this before, is downsizing. Sometimes people, when they're empty nesters in retirement, they don't need as big of a house. They don't need a 7-bedroom house anymore, right? They can get by just fine on a 2-3 bedroom house. And that's, their ranch style, where they don't have to go upstairs anymore. Everything's on one level. So that might be something to consider, is downsizing your house, getting rid of your mortgage. That would be another way to get rid of your mortgage, right? Is if you sell your house and downsize. Maybe you can just use those proceeds to buy a smaller house outright. So that can kind of work 2 ways there. Do you want to live in a different part of the country? Maybe you have family in a different state, in a different town in the same state. Do you want to move and be closer to them now that you don't have to commute to your job every day? Or do you want to relocate to a lower cost area? In Pennsylvania here, we talk about snowbirds a lot. So we have a lot of snowbirds that have homes in Pennsylvania. They live here in the summertime, and then in the wintertime, they go down to Florida. Or do you want to live in Florida full time? They got no income taxes in Florida. So a lot of people go down to Florida for the beautiful weather, obviously, but also maybe for some tax benefits as well. But you want to factor in taxes, like I just said. You want to factor in the climate. You want to focus on your access to health care in wherever you move to, and your proximity to your family are going to be some big considerations for where do you want to live. The thing about caring for children or being close to family is, are you going to be caring for any adult children, any grandchildren, or your parents in retirement? And does your family need any financial resources from you? Because that can be a really big piece of somebody's living expenses, is if they're caring for somebody else, whether that's a spouse who's disabled, whether that's a child who's disabled, a grandchild, family members, aging parents is a big one. Sometimes in retirement, we're caring for the generation above us and the generation below us. So you're caring for your parents who are aging and your children who are young at the same time. So sometimes that can really put a financial strain on people and might cause them to delay their retirement. And work, and I kind of alluded to this, don't think I said this explicitly, but work can be a source of purpose and a source of identity for some people. So if you don't have something to replace your sense of purpose with a hobby, again, with volunteering, with something else to fill your time, you might start to feel like you don't have a place in this world anymore. And that's not a great feeling. That's definitely not what I want you to feel whenever you're in retirement. Again, I want this to be an exciting time. I want this to be something that you spend your time doing the things that you actually love to do, but you get a sense of purpose from something else that's not working. And along those lines, one of the things that you can do to help combat this a little bit is to stay socially active, right? So join a bowling league, join a book club, join a Bible study at your church, whatever that is, where you can find a sense of community with people who have things in common with you, can really help you combat, again, that sense or that loss of purpose. This one's a big one, so I'm going to switch topics here. So this one's another big one that people, I think, stops them from retiring because of this, and that is the cost of healthcare. So if you retire at age 59 because you had the financial resources to do it, we looked at your financial plan, we said, yep, your budget looks great, you're going to be able to live on the money that you've saved up. Well, from age 59 to age 65, one of the things that you're going to lose when you retire is your health insurance. So you're not old enough to get on Medicare yet, right? Medicare doesn't start until 65. So from 59 to 65, you're going to have to find health insurance on the marketplace. And sometimes it can be really, really cost prohibitive to some people. And our director of insurance, Raquel, says this all the time, that this is one of the main reasons why people don't retire or they delay retirement. Is not because they need to keep working financially. It's because they can't afford their lifestyle plus the extra $1,000, $20 or $1,200 a person per month for the health insurance costs. So that's something to keep in mind, is to shop around the marketplace or have Raquel help you figure out your retirement healthcare plan so you can go into retirement with low-ish premiums that aren't going to completely break your bank, but that you can keep your same doctors, you can keep a similar level of coverage until you can get on Medicare. And then once you are eligible for Medicare, your window to apply for Medicare starts 3 months before you turn 65, the month that you are 65, and then the 3 months following whenever you turn 65. So that's a 7-month window, 3 months before, 3 months after, and the month that you turn 65. So you want to apply at least for Part A in that 7-month window. Now, Part B, supplemental plans, those are other coverages that you may or may not need, and it depends on when you retire. If you're still working when you're 65, you want to apply for Part A just to avoid the penalties that you might incur, but you don't necessarily need a Medicare plan because you're still working and you're still on your employer's plan. But if you're retired, that's when you might need to think about other supplemental coverages to make sure you don't lose access to your doctors and your prescriptions. Some other things to think about in the insurance world is long-term care. So this is something that probably was not part of your conversations leading up to retirement. Maybe now you're seeing your parents go into long-term care facilities, and you might look to that and say, okay, what if this happens to me? What will I do if I need long-term care in 30 years? Long-term care can get very expensive. Some of the nicer facilities in Pennsylvania could be $7,000, $8,000, $10,000 a month to stay in a facility. So that can really eat into your retirement savings, even if you don't live an extravagant lifestyle. So if you live on a modest budget, but you need $10,000 a month for retirement home care, that's going to eat into your plan way more than you taking a couple $5,000 trips. So we can, of course, bridge the gap with long-term care insurance. Now, traditional long-term care insurance is kind of going by the wayside because it can tend to be expensive. So they make hybrid policies that are life insurance plus long-term care that allow you to have the best of both worlds, where if you don't need the money that you put into it for long-term care, there's a death benefit on it for your beneficiaries. Or if you need the money for long-term care, then that money is there and your beneficiaries just might not get as much or anything whenever you pass away. So that can be something to explore, but it's very much a part of that retirement planning conversation is what's going to happen if I need long-term care. And especially for women, this is going to be a huge piece for you, especially because women, just as a gender, we tend to live longer than men as it is, and we tend to do a little better in nursing homes. Just we make friends, we knit, we have all these hobbies that we do, whereas men, no offense to men, y'all kind of give up sometimes. So you don't tend to last quite as long in nursing homes as women do. So for women, that might be extra costs that you, again, weren't necessarily planning for. So you're going to probably have to stretch your retirement savings over a longer period of time versus your male counterparts. And then the last one here is going to be life insurance, is deciding whether or not you need your term policy that you had that was supposed to just get you to the end of your mortgage. Usually term insurance is for short-term needs, it's not for permanent needs, whereas whole life or other permanent insurance is for permanent needs. So a lot of the times after retirement, life insurance kind of falls off of the importance scale, because if you passed away and you're retired, your spouse probably won't feel as big of a hit because you wouldn't have lost much income from that spouse passing away, versus if you're 35 years old and you're the breadwinner of your household, if you passed away when you're 35, your significant other would feel the impacts of that loss of income. So that's where you'd want to have life insurance then. But if you're 65 and you just retired, your spouse, if you passed away, your spouse is going to get a little bit of survivor benefits for your Social Security benefits. And if you had pensions and had survivorship listed on those pensions, they're going to get a portion of that. Plus, they'll be able to inherit your assets without any tax consequences. So it's not quite as big of a hit financially if you pass away when you're a little bit older. So sometimes life insurance just doesn't make sense to keep anymore. Raquel talks about having a final expenses policy that's maybe $10,000, $15,000 that would just cover the cost of your funeral. That's pretty cheap compared to keeping a whole life policy, but it can just be a little bit of something for your family so they don't have to dip into any kind of savings accounts to pay for your final expenses. Now let's talk about the timing of your retirement. So not necessarily the age at which you retire, but I want to talk about physically in the year that you want to retire. When is the best time to retire? So taking advantage of 401k matches could be a good thing before you retire. So if your company's match hits your account on December 31st, you might want to wait to retire until January 4th of the next year, just so you can get that match, that little bit of extra savings into your 401k before you walk out the door. If you retire into a little bit of the next month, and this isn't always the case, but a lot of employers will offer this. If you retire on the first of the month versus the last day of the previous month, typically you can keep your health insurance through the end of that month. So if you retired on April 1, you would get to keep your health insurance through April 30th, versus if you retired on March 31st, you lose your coverage on March 31st. So it just depends on that and how important keeping your health insurance for a little bit longer is to you. Maybe you have a major surgery that's coming up, so maybe you retire on April 1st and April 2nd you get your hip replaced. You want to have that health insurance coverage, so you want to make sure that that stays in place before you have this major medical thing happen to you. Keep that coverage and then switch to the marketplace after you have that surgery. Then Social Security is also going to come into the conversation. So this one does matter for your age at which you retire, not necessarily the month you retire. So retiring, let's just say you retire at 63. If you take your benefit right at 63, that's going to be a lower benefit than if you delay your benefit to 67. Now, you can retire whenever you want to, but you can't claim Social Security benefits until you're at least 62. So the window is from age 62 to age 70. So somewhere within that time frame, you have to apply for Social Security benefits if you are entitled to them. You don't have to, but you're losing out on money if you don't. So it's going to depend on your living expenses again. So sometimes it makes more sense for you to start your retirement benefit immediately after you retire if you're over 62 to help mitigate portfolio withdrawals. Sometimes if you don't need the money out of your portfolio and you're going to just let it grow anyways, then maybe letting your Social Security benefit also grow might make some sense too. So it depends on that. It depends on how much you need to live on. It depends on how long you think you're going to live, although that one's really hard to predict. But there is a break-even point when it comes to Social Security benefits. So if you take your benefit at 62, yes, you're giving up on some growth on that benefit versus if you delayed it a little bit. But at some point, I think it's around, maybe 78, 80 years old, it evens itself out. So if you delayed until age 70 and then got that higher benefit around age 78, 80, somewhere in that range, your age 62 benefit is eventually going to sort of catch up and it'll kind of break even. So it just depends on your situation. Again, there's no hard and fast rule as to when's the right time to take Social Security. It just depends on your unique situation. If you are entitled to a pension, you want to understand your payout options, your survivor benefits, and any implications. Are you entitled to a lump sum? Are you entitled to an annuity payment? Are you entitled to both? I know in Pennsylvania, teachers have the option to take a lump sum and get an annuity payment. So it just depends on your options, but you want to make sure you know them, and you want to make sure you have all of your paperwork filled out properly so that you get the option that you actually wanted to take in retirement. Survivorship on your pensions is typically a good thing to have, but I don't want to make that blanket recommendation either. So sometimes pensions have the option to take 100% survivor benefit, where you get an annuity payment for your life, and then if you pass away, your spouse is just going to continue to get 100% of that income that you were getting while you were alive. Sometimes it's 50%, sometimes it's 75%, 25%, or nothing. So it depends on your situation. It depends on maybe your age difference between your spouses. If you have one spouse that's 10 years older than the other and the older one is the one who has the pension, perhaps having a survivor benefit on that pension makes sense, because there's a really good chance the older person is not going to outlive the younger one. So you don't want to leave them destitute. You want them to continue on that income after you pass away. So you put survivor benefits on your pension. So again, depends on a lot of different factors, but that is something that we will explore whenever we review your financial plan is, hey, I run a scenario where, hey, if I passed away today, what happens to my spouse? So that's something to keep in mind for, again, if you have a pension. One last thing to consider is the conditions of the market when you retire. If you retire in a down market, it might hurt the longevity of your portfolio. There's something called sequence of returns risk that happens whenever you retire, the market goes down 10%, and then you pull out 4%. So now your portfolio is down 14%. Because you're not contributing to your account anymore after retirement, it's harder for your portfolio value to recover itself in a down market. So the risk of outliving your money increases with that sequence of returns risk, because you're compounding the fact that there's a down market with taking some distributions out of your portfolio. So again, that might be a conversation of, hey, we need to de-risk your portfolio. Hey, we need to maybe stop the distributions from your portfolio. Can you survive on your cash for a little while until the market recovers? There's different techniques we can use, different investment vehicles we have access to that can help you mitigate the risk in your portfolio in retirement. And my final piece is about your legacy. So whenever you go into retirement, you want to make sure you have a will in place and your estate documents that Dan Carr and I talked about in our last episode. Get your powers of attorney in order, get your healthcare directives, your financial powers of attorney in place. If you have any trusts, do we need to review any of those documents? Do we need to put new trusts in place? Make sure your beneficiary designations on your retirement accounts are current. Did you have a new grandchild that you want to add as your beneficiary on that account? Do you have other family members that you didn't think about whenever you first created the account that are now a little closer to you than they were before, that you want to get a little piece of the pie? We want to make sure that whoever you want your money to go to, we want to make sure it happens for you. And planning for wealth transfer and charitable giving, if those are things that are important to you. Towards the back half of your retirement, you're probably thinking less about the income that you need to live on, and you're maybe thinking about who your money is going to pass on to. So we want to make sure that that happens in the most tax efficient way possible, and that your money goes to who you want, when you want it to, how you want it to. Because we want to plan for generations to come. It ends up not being just about your life anymore. It starts to become about the next generation, your extended family, whoever, again, you want that money to go to, a charity, whoever that person or that entity is. We want to make sure that your money goes to where you want it to go. All this to say, retirement is not totally out of reach. It takes proper planning to ensure that you're not going to outlive your money, that you live a prosperous retirement, but that's what we are here for. So if you want to get more information, you can always give us a call at 724-733-4334 or email us at info@ytswealth.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, give us a like, follow us on all social media platforms. It is Watch Your Assets, and we will see you on the next one.